Welcome in, everybody. A little special edition of the Far Z Show, evening edition. Joining us right now on our Rough and Orthopedics guest line. You know him, you love him, from FanSided.com now, doing Eagles coverage and still doing his 76ers coverage with ESPN 97.3 in Atlantic City. Our good friend Michael Kaskey-Blomain joins us. There is his Twitter handle. You guys can follow him, all things Michael Kaskey-Blomain. Michael, what's going on, brother?
What's up, Mark? Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. Oh, first off, congratulations. I know personally I reached out to you and said, hey, congrats on the Eagles coverage there with FanSided. How's that going for you?
It's going well, man. I really enjoy being able to obviously cover the Eagles, cover the NFL. I've always been a huge Eagles fan, so it's nice to get to apply the knowledge on a professional level while still getting to do, like you said, the Sixers coverage, which has been limited physically because of this leg injury, but still I've been watching as much as possible, obviously.
Yeah, we were talking before I hit go on the old record button there. Go ahead, tell the people you're playing injured, man. You're playing hurt. What happened? Little ACL tear?
Yeah, been on the shelf since the end of January. Full Achilles tear. Men's pickup basketball league. Going up for a rebound. The leg didn't cooperate, and been on the mend ever since. So I can kind of commiserate with some of these NBA players that I've seen in recent years go down with the injury. Now I can give a firsthand perspective.
Yeah, that'll be great for your first-hand perspective for your next writing piece on just the ACL injury. It's simple as that. Well, I'm sorry. I just learned that before we went on here, so I am sorry to hear that. But as far as the NFL coverage goes, of course, I needed to talk to somebody that could talk a little bit about the NFL draft with me, and then I'll, of course, talk about the 76ers and what's going on in this first-round playoff series with the New York Knicks. But first, let's talk about the NFL draft. I always ask this question in this manner because it covers both bases. What do you want to see the Eagles do? What is your desire? And then what is your prediction? What will Howie Roseman and the Eagles do in the upcoming draft Thursday night in the first round?
Always impossible to predict what Howie's going to do, Mark. I think we all know that. I think he's probably wheeling and dealing behind the scenes right now. I think for me and a lot of people, obviously coming off of last season, we wanted to see, the defense addressed in the draft as a priority. And especially after the moves that we saw them make in free agency so far, obviously they did make some nice additions to the defense. Bringing back CJ in the secondary was nice. A couple upgrades in the linebacker area. But I think, obviously bringing in Saquon, they shored up the wide receiver position a little bit with Campbell and Parker. So, I think offensively they're really set. I really want to see them break this streak. I actually didn't realize this. I saw this stat the other day that since Howie's been the GM, they haven't taken a player in the secondary in the first round of the draft, whether that's a cornerback or a safety. I think this would be a great year to break that streak. There's a lot of good cornerback prospects on draft boards. And I think, if they stay at 22 or even if they move up, I think I'd like to see cornerback probably be a priority, followed closely by linebacker, as the two probably the main positions of need that I think they really need to hammer and capitalize on in this draft class.
Wow. So you and I are on exactly the same page. If I was to sit next to Howie Roseman in the war room, so to speak, and he would just say to me, hey, Mark, what do you think here? I'd be like, oh, dude, you got to go corner here. You got to take a corner in the first round. Linebacker would be in the second round or maybe late in the first round, depending on what goes on there. I just don't think it's going to happen. My desire does not match my prediction. My prediction is they go offensive lineman. What way are you leaning as far as your prediction goes here with Howie in that first round?
I'm gonna tailor my prediction to what I hope to happen. And I think there's so many good secondary players in this draft, and the line's always important. I definitely think that's going to be addressed late in like the later rounds. But to me, I think you go a high end cornerback, in that first pick. I know that's what I said I want to see, but I think part of it is what I think is actually going to transpire on the draft day. We'll see if that's what happens, but I think it would be really nice. I mean, you got Slay, you got Bradbury, both getting up there, obviously in age, maybe past their prime. And I think you really need to supplement that position with some young guys while those guys are still here. So you don't need to thrust the rookie corner immediately into a starting full-time role, but you got to play behind those guys and kind of transition them into a thing for the future. I think that would be wise. That's my prediction and what I would like to see.
I've talked to a lot of different people about James Bradbury and what the future holds for him. Are you of the school that he does come back, or do you think he'll be just a flat out cut released player by the time they start OTAs?
Great question. I think part of it does depend on how this draft shakes out. I think if they do land a high end cornerback and they feel like they can save that cap space and that money by parting ways with him by that date, they would do it. If your prediction and what a lot of people I think they're going to address the line early on, if that transpires and they don't end up picking a corner till one of the mid or later rounds, something like that. I think you have to bring him back just based off the lack of other experienced guys on the depth chart at that position right now. I know he was down statistically last year. 2 years ago, I thought he was pretty solid. I think you split the difference. He's obviously not, as good as probably he once was, but I don't think that maybe he's as bad as we saw last season. There was a lot of issues with that defense, new coordinator. I don't think he'll be as bad as, so I've seen some people make it out to be. So my guess is he'll be back if I had to, put a bet down either way, but I wouldn't be shocked if they went the other way and tried to save that cap space.
When it comes to the cornerback position in the draft, is there one guy that really jumps out to you that would make you the happiest if he all of a sudden was wearing midnight and Kelly Green?
I like Mitchell out of Toledo a lot, based off what I've seen in terms of going back and watching some of the film on him and covering the draft. I think he would be a guy that could potentially come in almost right away and contribute. Is he going to be there at 22? Probably not. After that, you start to look down. Arnold out of Alabama is a nice pick. Wiggins out of Clemens. I always want to say Andrew Wiggins because that name's just like ingrained in my brain. I think
Sure.
It's Nate Wiggins out of Clemson. And there's like a few other guys up on that seem to get really high marks on, a lot of these draft boards. So to me, I think there's a lot of options, but Mitchell or Arnold out of Alabama to me would be guys that you could potentially plug and play, almost right away next year.
Are you, as far as the linebacker spot goes, maybe late first round, second round, are you a Edgerrin Cooper guy? Everyone seems to be Edgerrin Cooper. Where are you at there?
I like Cooper. I mean, if he's there, I certainly wouldn't complain. I think it would be, it also depends, like, and you said on where they would end up picking in the draft. If he's there, I would like him. The kid out of UCLA, Latua, I don't think he's technically a linebacker, but he's a guy that could, be a solid edge rusher that they need, especially after parting ways with Hassan. So to me, especially with linebacker, the name isn't even as important as the fact that they're just addressing that position because it seems like they're something they've been so allergic to doing in recent drafts when it's been clearly needed. But I would say if they don't go in the first couple rounds there, I think that would probably be how they would go.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Let's flip it over to basketball because there's so much to break down here. Things that we already know, things that we'd like to see when it comes to those 10-9-8 76ers here, Michael. Put these in order for me as far as the blame. Let's just talk game 2 for now. Referees, no supporting cast help, injuries. Where would you rank those from the biggest reason as to why the Sixers lost and the least reason the Sixers lost?
That's tough. Referees are close. It's. I think you got to go. Just the way I look at basketball, I'm not usually one to blame like a referee. And even looking back on that last sequence of the missed rebound, if you get the defensive rebound, there's not even the room for error for the referees to step in and make that mistake that they did. So I think the lack of, I'm going to put the blame on the Sixers first in terms of, and like you said, largely the supporting cast. No one's stepping up, even, and you hate to even blame the finger at Joel playing what he's playing through. And that's just the story of his career. But those last couple offensive rebounds, you go back and look, he's not boxing anybody out either. And I think, the onus of the blame needs to be on the players in that situation. But with that said, was
I know you saw the full report. I know you saw the last 2-minute report. Yeah.
Right before I came on, I knew we would get into that too. And even before that, in the first half, I was watching the game with a couple buddies and I tweeted it out. Like, it was already a game that I was questioning how it was being officiated. Kind of, I thought it was unfairly one-sided. And I rarely preach on refs. I know mistakes get made. Usually things kind of even out. The way that game was playing, I just didn't feel like it was being called completely evenly. I felt like the Knicks were getting whistles that the Sixers weren't getting, consistently. And then to get to the end of that game where there's just multiple mistakes and the 2-minute report, I know it's supposed to make you feel better, but it kind of just makes you feel worse. Like there's no, I like the transparency. I get the idea behind it to show that, hey, we admit these mistakes were made, But when you're talking about the literal difference in a series being 2-0 and 1-1, it doesn't make you feel that much better for them to come out and be like, hey, yeah, we should have given Nick Nurse a timeout. Like, yes, Maxey got his jersey pulled very blatantly when he was trying to get the inbound pass, and it should have been called for a foul. Like, all those things happened. So I blame the players first because I don't think they should have even been in that position. But the reffing was egregiously bad.
Mm-hmm. All right, now let's just to talk about the officiating for a second there. That last play where Maxey's trying to get the inbounds and everyone's just standing around. Okay, Maxey gets the ball, it's juggled a little bit. He gets his jersey pulled, and then he ends up on the ground for what I thought was a push from behind by Josh Hart. He falls to the ground. Maxey falls to the ground, loses the ball at the same time that you have Nick Nurse trying to call that timeout. Because there was no whistle, because there was no timeout, because there was no foul, I was waiting for the travel call from the officials, and there was nothing. So how make that make sense to me somehow? Of all the basketball you've watched, of all the basketball you've played, how does that make any sense?
I mean, literally, the real answer is I can't. I think at that point they're so far down the rabbit hole, and they know that mistakes have been made, and to compound it and call it travel at that point when you haven't called the other obvious things that just happened right in front of you. And the timeout situation really blows my mind too. Especially, I thought there was a chance that they were going to come out in the last 2-minute report, because I'm sure you saw on Twitter there was a lot of people that were breaking it down frame by frame in terms of how thoroughly the tee was connected, if he hesitated when he was pushing the tee, and like piggybacking off that, I thought that the league was going to come out with some explanation as to why the timeout wasn't granted in fancy jargon that Adam Silver likes to use. The fact that they came out and just said that he clearly signaled a timeout that wasn't granted, I don't know. I literally don't know what to say about that. It makes no sense. Like, they were right there. It should have been called a timeout at the least. Or like you said, the Josh Hart foul on Maxey was another one in the 2-minute report that was missed that should have been called a foul. And right there you get I think they were in the bonus at that point. So that's 2 foul shots you should get. I mean, it's just a compound error on top of another one in such a short period of time. It's unbelievable.
All right. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, like, people talk about Tobias Harris, and they're like, you're not getting anything from Tobias. You're at least getting rebounds from Tobias. And I stopped expecting a lot of things from Tobias Harris a long time ago. And I still don't understand why people bring him up so often. But for me, I don't know who your guy is, but my guy, as far as biggest disappointment through the first 2 games, has been Kelly Oubre. Because I thought Kelly Oubre was emerging as this legit third scorer, though distant third, but third scorer behind Tyrese Maxey, behind Joel Embiid. And it seemed like over the last 2 months of the season, and even when Joel Embiid came back in the final, helped the Sixers through that last stretch there, it seemed like even if Kelly Oubre only had a 15-point game, it was like 10 of those 15 points were scored at a time where maybe Tyrese Maxey was off the floor or Tyrese Maxey went cold. Perfect example would have been last night in the game 2, third quarter. Tyrese Maxey goes the entire quarter, not without just a field goal, but not without a point in the third quarter. That, to me, was the time for a guy like Kelly Oubre to step up, knock down a 3, get an N1, go on a little personal run of his own. For me, he has been the most disappointing guy outside of injuries to Joel Embiid, outside of a sickness to Tyrese Maxey. The guy I was expecting more from was Kelly Oubre. Who's your guy? If it matches, it matches. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Well, first, I just want to say it's refreshing to hear someone that has a similar view of Tobias Harris as I do at this point, because I do think it's gone overboard that, like, no matter what goes wrong in a Sixers game and however poorly everyone else can play, it's somehow always Tobias Harris's fault that he has 12 points when he's had 12 to 16 points every single game for the past 5 years. Like you said, if he is what he is, yes, he's overpaid, but you know what you're getting, and getting consistently riled up about his lack of production when honestly he hasn't been he hasn't been hugely helpful, but to me he hasn't been like the biggest issue for them by far. The Kelly Oubre thing is interesting to me because I think honestly he's, first of all, in his defense, I do think he's been playing pretty decent defense on Jalen Brunson, which has been like a big part of his load coming into this series as like the primary defender on Brunson, who's really struggled from the field. So I do think he's been decent in the series on that end of the field, or on that end of the floor. But otherwise, I kind of just think he's showing his true colors in terms of that's really kind of who he's been throughout his career. He's a guy that some nights really looks awesome and looks like a guy that's like, wow, this could be a 24-point scorer in the NBA, super athletic, can knock down shots, can get to the rim, plays with tons of confidence. But there's a reason he's been kicked around so many times. There's a reason the Sixers were able to sign him in August for a vet minimum deal when he's still pretty young in NBA terms. He has not a reputation, but he's just been an inconsistent player, kind of an up and down and a streaky guy throughout his career. And I think, the intensity of playoff basketball, he was averaging 20 a game last year in Charlotte, which, they didn't sniff a competitive game at all. I think now you're really seeing a competitive game, and he's kind of just showing that, like some nights he looks great. He's not a guy to me that you can rely on to be your third option. I think that's, I don't want to say the mistake, but that's kind of the trap that a lot of Sixers fans fell into with the way he played throughout the regular season when he, definitely outperformed his contract and was pretty good for them in large stretches. But, Tobias wasn't that third guy. They were looking for someone to fill that void. And kind of by default, Oubre was placed into that role in the minds of many. And I just think he was never really built for that role. He's when they signed him, I was like, oh, he's going to be a guy that comes off the bench and can give you a spark. And that's what he's good in that role. If he's starting playing, primary defense on the other team's best player and you want him to score an efficient 20, I think that's just asking too much out of him. And if get around to your question, for me, I've just been disappointed in Buddy Hield. Not that I expected a ton out of him, but I mean, just in general, I think what a disappointment he's been since the Sixers got him. He's been a non-factor in the 2 games so far, barely playing. When he is out there, he looks tentative, slow to, react offensively, not really being able to get off his own shot, not doing much of anything. This was a guy, Daryl Morey said he thought it was the best player acquired at the trade deadline in February. Kind of smirked at the time when he said that, but we just had, he was pretty mediocre all during the regular season, and all people were like, we got to wait for him to get back with Joel. He was brought to play with Joel and play off Joel, and just hasn't been a factor in this playoff series so far. So, I mean, you could pick a lot of players on the roster, but that's kind of been the most blatant to me, just given the hype when he was acquired just a couple months ago.
Does anybody else get run off the bench? I feel like with Brett Brown, we were lied about shortening the rotation. I feel like with Doc Rivers, we were lied about shortening the rotation. And then here's Nick Nurse. Yeah, 3 guys off the bench. That's all you get. Anybody else going to get an opportunity to be that spark or be that guy off the bench that could provide that, defibrillator type of, shock to this Sixer system?
I just don't see it because this is who Nick Nurse is. This is how all the Raptors teams were. He went 8 deep. I mean, I see obviously a lot of people want Ricky Council in there, and it would be nice, but I mean, the trust isn't there. He didn't play consistently at all during the regular season. Maybe you go campaign a little bit. He played enough since he was acquired, and obviously, he's a guy that can get hot quick and knock down some shots. Maybe you give him a little bit extended run to get some more offense going. But other than that, I don't think, for as deep as people thought this team was, especially with the DeAnthony Melton injury, because that's a guy that would be playing, be like a legit part of the rotation. With him out there, and Paul Reed wouldn't even be playing either. If Embiid could play 48 minutes and Nick Nurse felt comfortable with it, Paul Reed wouldn't be playing either. He would play 7 if he could.
All right, so this is the question that everyone has then. Do the Sixers win one? Do the Sixers make? Do they do what Joel Embiid said? And, we're the better team. We're going to come back. We're going to win this series. How does this go from here on out, Michael KB?
I think from like a objective standpoint, I really think they have a chance because both these games have been, I mean, by all accounts, they should have won that game last night. Sure, they hurt themselves. The refs hurt them. They should have won that game. The first game was close. It could have gone either way. You'd think they'd come back. Subjectively, it's a little bit tougher when you're speaking as someone that's lived through 7 straight years of crushing playoff defeats, watching these Sixers teams seemingly inventing new ways to lose games. And it just, with Joel specifically, it's tough because it seems like all of these disappointments kind of like build up in his head and manifest when things are going poorly on the court in the playoffs, like the body language that people talk about. And it's just tough. Like after such a crushing loss like that last night, I like the optimism that the team displayed. I like Joel, not necessarily giving the Knicks like bulletin board material, but expressing confidence in the team. even though he didn't even look that confident when he said it. But, you know, I like the message. So, you know, I'm going to try to stay optimistic and say I think they do still have a shot. Obviously, you have to win Thursday night. If you go down 0-3, there's no shot. But, you know, they won both games in New York, which is what they're supposed to do. If the Sixers can rally and answer, make it a 2-2 series, they still have the best player in the series, maybe the second best player in the series in Maxey. So, you know, I think they have a shot. They just need some of these other guys to, you know, step up around them.
I'm not to endorse violence or anything, but Tom Thibodeau's just always had a punchable face, right?
Oh,
like, I'm not just, yeah, right. He's just like, I want to, like, I don't like violence, but I take a swing. I take a swing. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Just making sure I'm not crazy.
I'd watch Nick Nurse take a swing at him. That would be fun if they did that as like a side event, like a Nick Nurse
totally
like boxing match for charity or something.
Absolutely.
I'd watch that for sure.
When I saw Nick Nurse literally turn red in game 2, yelling at the official, I went, damn, that's more fire I've seen from Nick Nurse in quite a while. And I haven't forgotten about him being the head coach of the Raptors, complaining about Joel Embiid getting all the foul calls. I haven't forgotten about that, but I have not seen him that impassioned as he was in game 2 of this series. Michael KB, always great catching up with you, man. I appreciate you. If you guys are not following Michael Kaskey-Blomain, make sure you're doing so on all social media platforms. NFL editor now for FanSided, and of course, Sixers coverage for 97.3 ESPN down there in Atlantic City. Michael KB, thank you so much, brother. Great catching up with you.
Thanks, Mark, man. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Right back. Michael.